Joining us now to discuss that report and more, Blaine Holt is a former U.S. Deputy Military Representative to NATO and a Newsmax contributor. And Peter Doran is a senior fellow at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies. Good morning, gentlemen. Great to have you. So as we just heard that report from Jody Cohen, the second round of talks between Iran and the United States, mediated by Oman, are taking place in Geneva today. President Trump has weighed in, telling us that he believes Iran does want to make a deal. Let's listen to how South Carolina Senator Lindsey Graham has characterized the situation.
Our presence here today is to reassure the Israeli people there is no light or gaps between President Trump and Bibi about what to do and how to do it. There are two lines in the water right now. One's a diplomatic line, trying to find a way to end this regime diplomatically that will advance our national security interest. The other line is the military option. I think President Trump is looking for which line can catch the biggest fish. The bottom line is we're into weeks, not months, in terms of decision making.
Blaine, how seriously should we take this timeline here?
It's a very curious statement that he made because it was very clear last week that we stand with Israel. So why would you have to get in an airplane, not as a leader, but as a senator, to go reassure Israel? It's just, it's really doesn't really help the dialogue very much when the president's trying to negotiate an end to this in a demilitarized way, which is what his preference is. There's rational and there's irrational behavior. Look, the Ayatollah and their mullahs, they have to understand the cards and what's facing them. But at the same time, if there's going to be irrational behavior, no one should take the military option as a complete cakewalk, because if these guys are going to go out, they're going to go out with a bang and they're going to launch everything they have. So what we want to do is get them off in some fashion or form. And at the same time, every day those talks go on, the advantage goes to President Trump. And the reason that is because we have very, very good and sophisticated people weakening internally in Iran the command and control structure. So does the IRGC loyally salute in that direction, knowing that once it's the end, the Iranian people will come for them? Every day creates more turmoil, and the president's on the right track. And I know that Israel understands that strategy.
Well, hopefully Iran understands the strategy. But as we hear Senator Graham talk about two lines in the water, diplomacy and a military option, what, in your view, would have to happen or come out of these talks for the White House to decide that the diplomatic line has failed and start moving decisively toward the military option? Peter?
Well, I think the big point here is that incrementalism does not work when negotiating with the clerical regime in Tehran. Right now, there's three very important issues that must be agreed to, and I'm not quite sure the Iranian government is ready to agree to all of them. First, denuclearization. That means giving away any hope of an enrichment, uranium enrichment program that would make a nuclear weapon. Second, they must dismantle their missile system. We remember from the summer, these are missiles that the Iranians use to attack innocent civilians, such as in Israel. And third, we have to see a change in the regime. This is a brutal regime that just killed more than 30,000 of their own people. Those are three things that I don't think the clerical regime is ready to negotiate on at this point. And that's the trouble here for the administration.
Yeah, anyone using theology as a basis for their negotiation, I say that, you know what, they're not talks. Just the clock is ticking because the people are not rational.
Yeah, exactly. That's what we heard from Marco Rubio as well in his speech. Taking a critical look at the talks, especially enrichment, and as you just mentioned, Peter, we had the head of the International Atomic Energy Agency, Rafael Grossi, meeting with Iran's foreign minister in Geneva for what both sides called deep technical discussions on enrichment and inspections. This occurred just hours before this next round of U.S. talks, Iran nuclear talks, that is. Does Grossi's involvement, Blaine, give you more confidence that any deal will have real teeth here?
It does, because he can garner intelligence there that could be useful to all of us. They have been rebuilding the Natanz facility with alarming speed. I mean, it's going right back up. And then the thing that didn't get touched at all is the Pickaxe Mountain, and that needs a look as well. So I don't think that he'll get anywhere with, oh, we're going to give you inspections and we'll be transparent. None of that will happen. But in those talks, what he could do is discern certain signals, certain patterns of behavior that might be indicative and helpful for how we're going to choose our military options out. And again, if we do go to military action, it's not about incrementalism. It's about not hijacking a revolution. It's about putting the advantage in the hands of the Iranian people as they take this on by themselves. We can dial that up. We can dial that down. But what we don't want to do is get ourselves into outcomes like we saw in Iraq and Afghanistan.
Right.
So true. No one wants that. Ask any military family. But as the U.S. weighs its options with Iran, there's also a lot happening on the ally side of the ledger. Senator Marco Rubio just spent the weekend in Europe, meeting with Viktor Orbán in Hungary, praising him as a model for nationalist governance that's closely aligned with President Trump. Now, Peter, does this strengthen the White House's hand in Europe, or does it undercut U.S. credibility with more traditional allies who see Orbán as a Trojan horse for Moscow?
Well, I think Marco Rubio really handled his meeting in Budapest quite well. Let's recall there's a lot of things about the Hungarian government that resonate with American conservatives. Supportive family, supportive traditional values. These are all things that are straight in line with the White House's own agenda. Where that agenda diverges, however, is in how the Hungarian government is paying Russia through oil and gas to continue the war in Ukraine. Right now, President Trump has given them a short-term waiver on sanctions, which they should fall under, and I think that was on the agenda for their meeting. Here's the twist. They didn't get an extension of that waiver. So I think behind closed doors, we saw some serious negotiations, while out in front of the cameras, there were smiles and handshakes.
Blaine, what's your assessment of the relationship here with Orbán, especially given at this point in time when some are saying that Orbán may be a Trojan horse, he's connected to Putin, may not be the best person to be working with?
So you got to appreciate Orbán's position. He's kind of in between the dog and the fire hydrant here. If he is in a situation where he goes, yeah, listen, we'll go with the sanctions. This is great. Look, they're right next to Russia, and they just had one of their oil lines busted up by a country to the south that's in a war, and that would emaciate and destroy their economy. Also, they've got an overbearing EU that's saying you need to take more of these invaders, and we want you to take them right now, which violates all of their cultural values. And he's actually carrying the line that our country is carrying, rightly so, that Europe is the one running away from Western democracy and not the other way around. So spare the tears. Orbán, Fico, the Polish leader, they represent freedom, self-governance, and values that America can stand by. Ursula von der Leyen and the rest, not really.
Very true. Now, staying focused on the Secretary of State, who worked the halls in the Munich Security Conference discussions. Now, Peter, how damaging was AOC's performance in Munich with her vague, meandering answers on the U.S. leadership when you actually compare that with the Secretary of State? When you stack that up against Marco Rubio's sharper, more disciplined messaging that actually conveyed strength and reinforced alliances.
Well, if diplomacy was an Olympic sport, Secretary Rubio won the gold in Munich, and unfortunately, Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez did not. She wasn't even close to the platform. We saw a clear distinction here between a professional attitude and a Congresswoman who, quite frankly, didn't look like she was prepared for the international stage at this point. Marco Rubio presented himself as the true friend of Europe, but here's the key. He said the word together, you can count 29 times in under 20 minutes. And that theme landed well, and that's why I think Europeans after this speech were applauding him versus before they were looking to sneer.
That's why some cats can roam the streets because they're tough, while other cats, you know what, stay inside and look out the window.
I think AOC is the house cat kind, I would assume. But Blaine, curious to get your perspective on this as well. I'm sure you have a lot to say because AOC, she really fumbled with that question about Taiwan and the U.S. coming to Taiwan's defense. It makes us seem so inept on the world stage, especially as she's a sitting congresswoman with sights on the presidency.
This is why we have a philosophy. in diplomacy. It's called at the water's edge. We don't haul our domestic laundry and domestic politics into some international forum and squabble it all out so that we can look really stupid because we don't pay attention to international affairs every day of the week when we're in Congress. And, you know, she went well below what a C- student in 8th grade would tell you, which is she was supposed to say strategic ambiguity and the communique, the Shanghai communique, have served this country and its policy needs in Taiwan quite well, and we'll continue to pursue those as we go, and we'll monitor the relationship. Thank you very much. This is how bad they looked. They're not ready for prime time, and it did not stop there with all of them. It's just atrocious. It was embarrassing. And then Secretary Rubio walked in like a true Secretary of State, stood up strong, confident. American leadership is here. We're going to advise you. You should really kind of go back to Western values. That would be wonderful if you did.
Yeah, total failing grade. And guess what? There's no extra credit. Thank you so much, Blaine and Peter. We appreciate it.
Thanks,
Take
guys.
care.
Thank you.